So today we're starting on a new time period. It's really just Gothic art. You can just put it under Gothic art. So it's a new tab in your book, right? And it includes Byzantine art and Islamic art. Okay. Byzantine art is sort of Romanesque, so it has a Romanesque feel to it because we just ended Rome, which never ends, but Rome adapted into the early Christianity, and so it becomes Byzantine art. Gothic art is a little bit later. It is more representative of like the architecture. When you think of Gothic art, you think of the cathedrals. And Islamic art, which influenced Gothic art. So Gothic art and cathedrals don't exist without Islamic art and cathedrals. Their domes all came from Islam. Okay, so there's this huge influence, this entire region, right, the Middle East, on its influence on each other, obviously, right? So that's where we're going to start. And the first thing I want to talk about is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, because these are the three main religions that affect Gothic art and this entire time period. And this part of the world in general is dominated from now on, right? Because we have the birth of Christ, along with these religions, these three major players. So Christianity is the dominant religion in the medieval European time. And most of the cathedrals are built around Christianity. However, there's a lot of Islamic art that dominates the religious atmosphere and the influence. So all of these structures, the Islamic structures came first. Then where the Gothic cathedrals were built sort of simultaneously, but influenced by the architects of a lot of the Islamic architecture, which already existed, by the way, in India. Because remember we talked about India. I go back and forth a little bit with India because there's a Silk Road. So there's a lot of influence between the Asian worlds and the Western worlds. African worlds, yes, but not so much yet, right? It's more of the Asian worlds that's the influence. And in India at this time, we have the Islamic culture thriving there and also in the Middle East. So with the architecture, so if you think of the Taj Mahal, you guys know the Taj Mahal is actually an Islamic structure. We can talk about that a little bit. Did you guys already know that? Most of you? No? Do you know what I'm talking about by the Taj Mahal? I'll have to show you. Okay, but that's a side note because that's a little bit later. So we're going to talk about Byzantine art. It is the art of the Eastern Roman Empire. So it's the Roman Empire that creates Christianity. Makes it legal, legalizes it, creates it as a religion in the area. So already existing in the area was Judaism and the Islamic religions. And then with the Roman Empire, that set into play in 527 with the Edict of Milan, and we'll talk about that in the creation of the Bible, and all of this came out of this time period. Okay. So iconoclasm is a big controversy, right? Because the Christians who were very new at this time. So we're going to talk about Christians in many, many different respects, okay? Because Christianity is one of the most, it actually morphs more than Islam and Judaism, sort of stays true generally. Christianity has many different sects within it, right? So it morphs more. But we, at the beginning of is early Christianity with the birth and death of Christ, and his teachings, and that's actually Gnostics, okay? And so we're going to get into that. Those are the early ones. But during this time, we're talking about a huge span of time again, okay? We keep doing this with the slice of pizza, you know, it's huge. We're talking, 500 years, basically, time period, okay? So it's hard to grasp these huge time periods, but I'll show you what I'm talking about more. So basically, with their controversy is that at first, with the early Christians, the Greeks and the Romans, pretty much the Greeks, were wiped out and all of their art was destroyed because they were icons, and they were pagans because they were, the umbrella term using multiple gods, right? And worshiping multiple gods, the pantheon of gods. And so it became a big thing to have idols. And so they made it a law. There was a law, basically, that there could be no iconic images. However, obviously, what is the church full of? Iconic images, right? That's the Mary and the Christ and the beautiful artwork. It's all iconic, okay? Because that just means that it's a picture, a religious image that is being worshipped or being used as a vehicle of worship. That's what it means. So basically, there was a big controversy because, Egypt, maybe during that time period, was like actually worshiping the object as the god, right? And so the controversy is the object the god, or is God above the object? And this became a battle of the arts, you could say. But then it becomes legal again with Christianity to have icons. So there's a gap in time where you can't have any images of any religious images or symbols or statues, right? So like the Buddha is a statue, that's an icon, okay? Even though they're not praying to the physical statue, they are, in some respects, right? Because it represents Buddha. But then again, these represent Christ. So it becomes okay, again, to have these icons. Now in Islamic art, okay, you'll see it's all, the very beginning, the Persian art has symbols of images of people and, prophets, but right now it merges into no images. It's all sacred geometry. So there's no icons in Islamic art. Generally, when you walk into the temples or they're going to be just beautiful, mostly calligraphy, okay? Mostly calligraphy. We're going to talk about that. All right. So 300 AD, so that's 300 years after the death of Christ. We're going to actually go back in time. We're going to kind of be in this period, maybe 300, 500 years, because this is the time of Constantinople and the beginning of Christianity as a religion. But that means for 300 years period of time, which is 3, lifetimes, is many different versions that get taken out so that the Roman Catholic Church can have their version, and it is done through the artwork too. Okay, so there's these are, okay, so we're talking about a couple different things. We're talking about, so just to categorize everything nice and neat, okay? I know I get really tangent oriented. So this is Byzantine art. This is Islamic art, okay? This is the Hagia Sophia. This is the Sophia. It is 537 CE, Common Era. Okay, so Common Era, AD. I know it's confusing because it's not confusing. You guys have it. I like to just continue with the original ones just to keep it simple. Then we have Gothic art. Okay, so you can see that the Gothic art is, so this time period encompasses Islamic art as well. It all kind of encompasses it at the same time, but it's where it sort of has its roots. Then we have Gothic art, which is what we think of when we think of the cathedrals, okay, the flying buttresses. This is also illuminated manuscripts, right, which is how the Bible is first dispersed because people can't read. So it's handmade with gold leaf and beautiful images. And there's illuminated manuscripts in all of the religions, right? Not just They're just absolutely gorgeous, okay? They're art pieces in all the religions. And then we can talk about Islamic art at the same time, often dated a little later. However, there's all kinds of articles written and studies done that show that Gothic art doesn't exist without Islamic art, because it's actually the influence of these structures. And in fact, there even had contests and rivalry in the architectures. There were two main buildings being built at the same time, and they had competitions, okay, Gothic and Islamic, as far as who would have the most grandiose imagery. So here you can see also illuminated manuscripts, but they're done more with calligraphy, right? Because the calligraphy is the art. And also the vases and the pottery become a big part of it. Okay, so we're gonna jump into early Byzantine here. And this is actually a very beautiful time period, because the artwork is just absolutely spectacular. It changes, right? So it becomes, even though we had, like, the Greek art was interesting, the stories I told were more interesting than the artwork itself, because it wasn't very advanced as far as the artistic skill level, right? It was more rudimentary. So now we start to introduce gold leaf into painting, right, into the frescoes. And some of the earliest, actually the earliest fresco of Byzantine art is found in Turkey. And that is in caves underground. There's huge underground cities in Turkey that we'll talk about that have the remnants of the first early Christians, but they weren't the ones who built these underground cities. It was long before them that were built. So they came along, and then they created churches underground because it was out, they could be killed. This was a heightened time of killing for religion, okay? And so remember when I talk about 0 degrees Pisces, it turns into religion, and everyone has religious fever, like hot fever, okay? Like, it's crazy. Like, if you could transport yourself back into that time, you would not believe the intensity of people. We think it's intense now with religion. This is nothing, okay? This is way watered down, okay? You can live, I can live. But at this time, if you were caught in studying Christianity in an Islamic world, or in, you could be definitely murdered, you will be slaughtered, right? So they had to hide. So religions often hid depending on where they were located, right? So in Turkey, this was not a safe place for the early Christians, and so there was a lot of the early, like, you could call them like temples, were underground in caves. And that's where the art is, and that's one of the reasons they got so preserved, because they were outside of the light. Yes? Okay, so we could talk about a little bit about Madonna, the Virgin Mary, right? And we have a lot of, I just put that in there because that's Egyptian, right? Kind of the same ideas throughout lots of different religions. Although if you read the book, God is Not One, we see the differences too. So I'm not always trying to find similarities. However, there's a lot. Now this is a mosaic. See how it's a mosaic? So they're tiles. And then that is on a panel, like a wood panel. Okay. And then, who's that? Madonna. Oh, is that her real name? No, that's not her real name. Okay, so, I know she's not in fashion right now, and she's really old. But I just wanted to show you some of the culture making fun or poking at or rebelling against or whatever. You'll see it. Madonna's the most obvious one because she named herself Madonna. And everything from the beginning of her music career was all about sort of mocking or like a virgin, right? She sang the song. right? So I'm just showing you some culture of, like, it even says the icon issue, right? So it's like iconic, right? These symbols in our culture, we see them all the time, but this is the most obvious, right? And it's also maybe a spin on it, a dark version, an inversion, or a mockery, right? But this is acceptable now in our music industry. We see it everywhere. But if you were back then, you were not going to, do anything like that. But I just wanted to show you where we're at, like, culturally. And the obsession with the Virgin Mary. Also, Guadalupe is the Mexican one. So that's, if you think about, that's a little bit later on, much later on, with the conquering of the whole Mexico area, landmass, with the Crusades, and we're going to talk about that, right? But Guadalupe is the Virgin Mary through the Mexican version, and it's more amplified than Christ in their religions, right? So let's go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about the very first original pictures of Christ that we have, and we don't have anything, by the way, of. So he's like actually the most famous person on planet Earth. Did you know that? This is the most famous person on planet Earth. Even though Christianity is not the most popular religion, it's the most famous person. Everybody, right? You agree? Anyway, it doesn't matter what your religion is. So these are some of the first images, and most of the early images of him are Roman, because this is a Roman time period, and Christianity is birthed out of the Romans. This is also one of the very first images that we have. So now you have to remember that the death of Christ is 33, and we have only writings after like 60, and images were kind of talked about, documented 30 years after his death, right, or more. Can be even a century. When we're talking about this time period, a lot of things as far as time are distorted. We don't have the right accuracy on time because we're not carbon dating these sort of drawings, right? There's no carbon dating unless you have a skeleton or a tooth or something organic. Okay, so we have a lot of book burning. So this is a time of, we're gonna get into some very dark things here, okay? Because the Crusades, it's beautiful and it's dark. It's almost like this time period is the highest and the lowest. It's kind of crazy. But across the board, there is just a rivalry for information and religion. Okay. This, I'm kind of jumping ahead with this one here, so I'll come back to it. But I do want to have you guys read this chapter that I put together for you. This is a very important chapter, okay? So this is 1291, but we're going to be looking at this entire time period. It's called the Dark Ages, and this is a period of time where they basically, the Romans created the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope and all of these figures, and then, so even though Roman fell as an emperor, it got rebuilt as a religious empire, right? It's the religious empire of the world. We're going to come back to this. This is the Crusades. Okay. So I want to talk about Catharism. Who's heard of Cathars? Anyone? Gnostics? They're the same thing, Gnostics. Okay, so when you research and learn a little bit outside of like a religious class, because that's going to only show you that particular version. The Cathars are, if you look at it through a historic, so you can take like historical religious classes. So this is a group of early Christians who were the first ones to be slaughtered from the Roman Catholic Church. And they basically were monastic type people, like in that image. And they studied Christianity with a different twist to it than maybe what you guys are familiar with. And this is where they were pushed up to and then all burnt alive at this place. So the Cathars are a religious group so at the beginning of Christianity, at its birth, there are many, many different studies of it, okay? So when the Christ teachings came out, there's no Bible, like there's a Bible, but it's like there's many versions of the teachings and the writings, and everybody kind of goes with their own. This one is a little different. It has a different twist, okay, to it. Basically, the Cathars, they became heretics, all right, in France, and they basically set the stage for what's to come. We're going to actually watch a movie about it because it's so important. So when you think of the Inquisition, it's a vast amount of land. So this is France, okay? So when Christianity rose, there were groups of people who decided to study and really truly believed in their own versions of it. The Cathars believed that the body was the sin, and that God, you had to actually overcome your body to merge with God. And it wasn't like the three, right? And so it became heretical, but they also were not part of the church, so they had their own practice, and it was freer. They also had women and men were both practicing, so as like priests, and you can look it up. It's actually quite fascinating because it's before what we consider Christians, okay? So when you go back in time, you get closer to Christ's teachings, you get to some interesting different versions than you might be familiar with. So this is it's very famous, the Monsouge. This is where they went, and from there they were captured. But this is just one group, okay? This is just one group. They're the first ones. There are many, okay? So any group that is strong, has a strong hold on the Christian religion is going to be considered heretical. So there's lots of rumors about them as well, right? Because whenever you have a group of people who are completely slaughtered and their writings and teachings are burnt, what can people say about them?
They don't exist.
They could say they don't exist. They can make up stories that they were all homosexual. That's what happened with the Templars, right? Anyway, do you guys know a little bit about what I'm talking about? You can make up anything you want, okay, when you're dealing with this. But they actually have a manuscript that is they hid in the ground, and that was found in like the 1920s, okay? So that's how people started to learn about them, because they didn't exist, like you say. They disappeared. So whenever these groups of early Christianity came together and had their teachings, they disappeared. But then, like I said, they hid this. This is something we're going to talk about. It's called the Nag Hammadi. Who's heard of it? No? Okay, so they are writings that are in a scroll that were found, and they talk about the Cathars and the Gnostics, which are pretty much the same thing. Gnostic, what does Gnostic mean? The word, does anybody know? Gnosis? Okay, it means to know. So they believed they had a direct connection to God. They didn't need the church, right? So this is something I just wanted to show you. I don't want the volume on. But we have a time period here
Images unveiled by the
where a lot of what we learn about our past isn't necessarily the complete story, obviously, because we have that's why it's called the Dark Ages, because we really are in the dark when we study this stuff. But recently, these images came forward. They are very Romanesque, you can see, and they have female priests, okay? So when you look back into the teachings and you see that, like in the Library of Alexandria, you have the killing of women who are teaching, and then you realize that actually there actually were female priests who held powers of like priesthood, then you question what is this version, right? What's being written and said, because obviously they don't all go together. But anyway, you can see here that these are early Christian Byzantine pieces of artwork, and these are in caves. So a lot of this artwork are in caves for many reasons, right? I talked about how people had to hide to study especially early Christians, to study their religion. Well, the Jews were always killed, you can forget about the Jews. I'm just kidding. No, I have some Jew heritage. But it's there's like, they were always slaughtered, but the Christians also were persecuted. And of course, they all were. We're gonna watch this. Sometimes I give it for homework, so I might do that. It has to be watched. It's very important. It talks about the Templars, the Cathars, and the beginning of the Crusades. And this is so important because you don't have a context of the Middle Ages unless you understand this, but we're not gonna watch it right now. I wanna get through a little bit of the slideshow. So here are some of the early...
Baker, today we're going to look at some...
the depictions of Christ. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I just want to show you some images. So obviously art tells you things, right? Because it's a visual story. And here we have today's versions and different versions throughout time. These are the earliest, okay, so it's going back in the centuries. We have, the earliest ones are the Roman ones, where he's wearing a Roman robe, and I'm going to show you that. Let's go back. So, yeah, you can do religious studies, and that's good too, but if you just look at the artwork, you'll see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, skip. Okay, let's go to this one. You see these images here on this cover? So these are the very first images, and these are, when you understand like the outfit and everything, the Roman cloaks, also they have Jewish information in them because they have the tassels, which are from Judaism. So you can look at the depictions of him. Of course, like I said, they're long after his death, okay? So there's nothing, if we have the dates right, which we could still consider. But obviously this is a hot topic,
Baker,
so I'm just showing you some of the
is
artwork.
the Christ about the oldest Bible manuscripts. However, I mention it now because it also houses this image,
Okay, I'm gonna show you this one a
considered
little
to
bit.
be one of the oldest Byzantine icons still
So this
in
is
existence,
Byzantine, okay?
dating to around 550 CE. Now, if you know anything about the history of the Byzantine Empire, aka the Eastern Roman Empire, you'll know that icons were a source of great controversy. Basically, an icon is a religious image used for worship. In the early medieval period, there were some Byzantine Christians who felt that icons should be used, and others who felt that they should not be used. Well, during most of the 700s into the early 800s, those who felt that they should not be used held sway, and therefore during those years, many of the oldest images of Jesus were destroyed. However, this particular one survived because it was located in Egypt, which by that time was controlled by Muslims. Now, let me point out two things about this particular depiction of Jesus. First, it is in a style known as the Christ Pantocrator, which to this day is quite frequently used in Eastern Orthodox churches. Some of its main features include a halo with a cross in it, a New Testament in Jesus' left hand, and and his right hand making a very specific gesture that represents the letters ICXC, which stands for Jesus Christ. Secondly, this particular Christ, Pantocrator, is unique in that there's something special going on with Jesus' face. At first glance, the eyes look a bit weird, and you might have assumed that the artist was simply not that good. But the reason why the face looks a bit strange is that the artist actually painted two different faces. This becomes clear if you mirror each side. The reason for this probably has to do with the artist's attempt to symbolize Jesus' supposed dual nature. Okay, the next image we're going to look at is located in the Israeli town of Shivta, which is actually not too far from the St. Catherine's Monastery. It too comes from a Byzantine site and dates to around 550. But as we're about to see, it is quite a bit different. For one thing, the image is no longer in very good shape. The church it is located in now lies in ruins, and although the site was investigated in the 1930s, it was only in 2018 that this image was noticed. Here's what it looks like. If you can't see much, I don't blame you. Let me zoom out a bit and add some lights. So two things stand out right away. One is that this Jesus does not have a beard, and two, he appears to have short, curly hair instead of long, straight hair. So, although this image was created around the same time as the previous one, it represents a very different way of depicting Jesus, one that we will see more of the further back in time we go. A good example is the next image I want to show you, which is over 100 years older and comes from the mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna, Italy. Galla Placidia was the daughter of Emperor Theodosius I, who was the emperor that made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. This isn't actually her mausoleum or burial place though. Rather, it is a chapel that she had built during her lifetime. Luckily, it is very well preserved. Over the north entrance is this colorful mosaic of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, a theme that comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 10. Once again, note the curly hair and lack of a beard. Next, I want to show you another image from the same time period, roughly 425 CE. This is a carving from the doors of Santa Sabina Basilica in Rome, which is the headquarters of the Dominican Order of Catholic Friars. What makes this image particularly important is that it is the oldest known image of Jesus on the cross, the other two individuals being the two thieves that Jesus was traditionally said to be crucified alongside. Here, Jesus once again has a beard, which goes to show that during the 5th and 6th centuries, there was still some variation when it came to how Jesus was depicted. Let's now move from the 5th century to the 4th century, i.e. the 300s CE. Most of the images from this century, as well as any that are even older, are located in catacombs. Catacombs are underground burial places, and in ancient Rome, there were many of these. It is often said that early Christians used these catacombs to worship in secret for fear of being persecuted. However, generally speaking, this is not actually true. Most of the catacombs were used by early Christians as, well, catacombs, a place to...
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead right here. I just want to show you this one. Because it's getting later and
the
later,
dead
earlier
were
and earlier.
understandably seen as being stories about magic. We've now come to our final three images. The third oldest image we have of Jesus is from this sarcophagus lid, which is inscribed with the words Severa in Deo Vivas. But note that the person shown to the left of the words is not Jesus. That's likely an image of Severa, the woman who was buried in this particular sarcophagus. In Deo Vivas means, may you live with God. Jesus is over here. He's, of course, the baby being held by his...
I'm skipping ahead to one more. Just want you to look at some of these images.
his bed.
This is one of
And
the
on the
earliest
right,
ones.
you can see Jesus in his typical Roman form. Short hair, no beard, simple tunic, and mantle. Our best guess is that this image dates to around 235 CE. So basically, we have nothing from the first 200 years after Jesus' death. Well, not quite. There's actually one more bonus image that I want to show you. I didn't include it on the main list because it doesn't actually show Jesus' face. This is actually a piece of graffiti made by a non-Christian in order to poke fun at someone named Alexamenos, who was a Christian. The words, written in Greek and scratched below the image, read, Alexamenos worships his god. Depicted on the left is presumably Alexamenos, and on the right is Jesus, hanging on the cross, but with the head of a donkey, which was obviously meant as an insult to.
Okay, so that means 200 years without any images, and the writings are before that, but just so you guys have an idea. We talked about all these different versions of him. And this is one of the earliest Bibles. And let's just keep going a little bit in here. Which one is this? Okay, I'm going to come back to this one. I want to get to the churches. So a lot of these early Christian churches aren't Gothic churches, okay? They're more simple. See how they're more simple? But then we kind of start to get expanded into the Gothic cathedrals, which have the dome. This is the dome, which is the Islamic influence, right here. And the ribbed vaults. This is very much a signature frequency. This is a signature of Gothic art, and you need to know them. This is a beginning of some incredible architecture that starts to take place. And the flying buttresses. I'm kind of just going to go over everything kind of quickly, so we're going to go back into things. This, let me get to this place. This is Russia. Okay, so this is sort of the Russian version of the Gothic architecture, kind of showing you that there's different types. This is also a very particular style. And we're going to skip this for now. So there are Gothic architectures all over America as well. This is some images that you can see. They're all over the world. They're built around the same time period. This one's a little later, so we're going to skip that one right now. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the more interesting aspects of Gothic architecture, which is these spiral tops, and we're going to get into this a little more. I just want to show you a little bit here. Some interesting things, okay? So this is a computer chip, and this is Chartres Cathedral in France. We're going to look at an entire slideshow just of Chartres Cathedral. So they had an understanding of frequency and energy in these cathedrals. They were literally built around light and sound. So there's an interesting dynamic happening during this time period because we have the most incredible architecture that any humans have ever made, and also a slaughtering and a killing of humans. So it's questionable. That's why people have a lot of controversy over this time period. So when we talk about the labyrinths, I wanted to show you a picture. What's that?
QR code.
A QR code. So let's just say that we go back to, we are in the future 2,000 years from now, because that's how far back we're going, okay? 2,000 years plus some. Yes? So if you go back and you were in the future and you come back to this time period and you see these QR codes, but you don't have a phone, what would you think they are? Would you be able to figure it out? I still can't figure out what they are or how they are, right? So this is kind of what we're looking at when we're looking at Gothic architecture, because we're talking about a 2,000-year period. So even though there's all these religious overlays with this architecture, it's actually much deeper than these kind of ideologies. It has something going on inside of these cathedrals. Okay. And remember when I talked about somatics? Yes? Okay, we're going to take a look at some of these interesting things. We're going to look at how the sound frequencies and the patterns in the artwork are identical. Okay, not just similar, but identical. So this is Chartres Cathedral, which you can go to in France, and you take your shoes off and you walk the labyrinth, right? And we're going to see some of these cathedrals on the inside. So these are not windows, they're decoration, but they're in these patterns. When we looked at ancient India, we saw these frequencies and patterns, remember? So take a look at some of the work here, the artwork, okay? And I'm gonna go to this, talk about this real quick. So these cathedrals often were found and then built upon. They usually have many, many different architects in them. So they usually have one that they claim, but a lot of times they don't even have the name of the architect for these Gothic cathedrals. Of course, these artworks this one is Renaissance, but they're built on top of each other. So when you think of a cathedral being built in the year like 500, okay, then you have the Renaissance in 1500. You have the same cathedral being recreated and reworked and redeveloped, often after war has damaged it. So these cathedrals originally, that we're going to look at in the Renaissance, were originally Gothic cathedrals. They often have like their base there. Although this particular type of, this is Gothic. This is the pillars that I'm talking about. And when you look at one of these buildings, you're going to see that they were built in different time periods, because we're going to look at it. You can see that these were built at a different time than these. And this area in the center is where all of the Christian motifs would be, okay? So that means oftentimes they would find older structures and rebuild their churches on top of them, okay? So even though we think linearly like, oh, this is Gothic, okay, so that was created in the Gothic time period. That's actually not the case. So we talk about ancient builders, okay, and like things that we don't know a lot, and these structures, when you look at them, it's kind of a controversial subject, but you'll see that they're actually created by different artists and they look different. The pieces that are like really old and ancient versus less ancient. Okay. Let's see what time is it. Okay, good. So there's this church that, let me just come here. It's called the Rosalind Chapel. Who's heard of it? I talked about it earlier when I was talking about somatics. So this is a chapel in Scotland, and each one of there's stones has a somatic pattern on it that creates music. So I'm going to go to it and show you what I'm talking about. so that you can understand as we look at all of these cathedrals a little more. So each one of these stones right here is a pattern that actually is a specific sound, like when you do a violin tone, it creates a pattern, and that, like a C or a B, and actually creates a tone and a pattern, and that's what's on these chapels. Okay, so these are somatic sounds. And so people go there who are musicians, and they can literally play the notes by deciphering the images. We need to understand this concept in order to look at cathedrals, because pretty much cathedrals are created for sound and light in a way that we don't even understand today, like, or recreate. So these are the somatic sounds when certain tones, and that's what's in the Rosslyn Chapel on the stones. We don't have to go through the whole thing. I just kind of wanted to show you that each one of these is a somatic sound. Okay. What do you guys think of that? Interesting. Now, there are a lot of these places, okay, but we're going to look at this. This is a very hot topic, okay? It's a very hot topic. Like, this is obvious because it's like in your face. You can see it, right? It's written about, it's talked about, it's published, but it still isn't promoted, okay, in history, meaning you're not going to learn it in a history class generally. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So here we have the notes. We already saw how somatics work, okay, right? So that's sound and music. All right, let's go to Chartres Cathedral. So it's in France, right outside of Paris, this cathedral. It's one of the most famous, there's so many famous cathedrals around the world to visit and talk about, but this is one of the most beautiful ones. It has all of the typical Gothic architecture with the flying buttresses and stained glass windows. This is Chartres Cathedral. So they light it up today now with those. But you can see it's Gothic because of the pointy top, and we'll also see that the statues are elongated, okay? So when we have statues that are like Christian statues, they have Christian characters on them, right? But they're elongated and they're put in here. You want to tell me, we can talk about how this was built. Some of these cathedrals are just mind-boggling, okay? You just go in and they're huge, they're so massive. This one isn't quite as massive as some of the other ones, but it's still extraordinary. And you can see here on the statues how long they're elongated they are. So this is the entranceway, and it's dedicated to the mother. So all the statues are sort of like a female. They're the dedication to Mother Mary. So the main statue in the place is Mother Mary when you walk dedicated to her, with all of the apostles. And then here's some of the sacred geometry that we're talking about. So when we think of geometry, yes, this is also influenced from the Islamic geometry, and then it has an acoustic energy to it, meaning that so these cathedrals, they're built in order to house the sounds of these organs, okay? Because you know the organs make the sound. And everything is designed around sound and light and frequency. It's known for some of the stained glass windows with these beautiful ornaments. So here in the center, you'll have Mary, and she's the main centerpiece, main icon when you walk in, because it's a church dedicated to her. You can see how long and tall these are. Okay. And over time, things have been rebuilt. As you can imagine, there were fires and different things, but definitely everything is about a vibration of sound. So having these long pillars inside will create a different acoustic vibration when the organs are played. So it's for an angelic experience. That's what they're designed for. They're like beyond anything. I have been in a Gothic cathedral. There's one in San Francisco. You've been in one? Where?
Wisconsin.
Where, Wisconsin?
I think it was Richmond area, it's in southern Wisconsin.
And then you've been in one? Where?
UK.
The United Kingdom? Which one? Where did you know?
Well, I don't know.
Doesn't matter. So they have them here in America too. Yeah. So in San Francisco, there's beautiful Gothic cathedral, which also will like make you think. Okay, why is there a Gothic cathedral? Do you guys know what time period this is? Of course, they're mimicking them and they rebuilt them, but the original ones. This is very much before Columbus. Okay. This is the floor of the cathedral, which has the same image as the computer chip, right? So obviously they're understanding something, or we're understanding something that they're understanding. Remember when I talk about the cell phone and the, that scan thing.
QR code?
Yeah, the QR code, which by the way, you guys, some of you, do you grew up with it? I don't know. It's a strange thing, the QR code, okay? How it works and processes information. But this processes information in a way like that, but different, okay? So you have to think like 2,000 years ago, the kind of frequencies and energies they're working with, because it's the same concept, but a different concept. Okay, so we talked about that. The Gothic Cathedral in San Francisco also has this floor as well. And here we have the images of Mary. This is called the Black Madonna. She's painted black. And then we have this one. Now you can almost tell, can you not tell that these are built at different times just looking at them? Can you tell? Okay, so we're talking 2,000 years of time, right? So there's a thing about claiming as architectures or artists, the rights to something. We do that today. But these are built upon each other, and they're founded. We talked about founded, right? By a certain group of people. And here's inside. So the whole cathedral, it never has any, well, obviously it doesn't have artificial light, but even the candles aren't part of it, like other cathedrals. This is all about the light from the windows. So the way that the light hits is designed specifically for the art piece and to create a godly experience of divine, and a divine experience of some sort. actually, we could take a little walk around it, but I don't need to go on one. Okay, so here's Christchurch Cathedral. So Notre Dame, you know that one that got burned down? It's very similar to this one. It looks almost identical, except for it's different, okay? It's a little different. It doesn't have the elongated statues that this one has. This is very specific for its statues. But it's built the same, and it has the rose window on it as well. So these cathedrals are scattered around, and they're very similar to each other when you walk in. They're usually dedicated to different deities or Christian figures. So you can see it's dark, and then everything is about the light in the windows. And these are the organs I was talking about. You see the organs on the wall, okay? That's all about sound. So you can see the acoustics in here would be pretty profound. She's talking about the damage that's been done to it over time. So there's a comprehension of sound and music and light that isn't really put into necessarily writing or books or passed on. So it's an information, a technology, something that we can't really understand or replicate today. Nobody really builds stuff like this today, right? And you could try to figure out how they built these massive structures without any cranes, any of the technology that we have today and are familiar with. Okay, that's another reason it's called the Dark Ages, because we're actually missing so much information we can't even figure it out. Like we have the religious stories, or we have some information about, you know, how it was built from the architecture, but we don't really have a lot of information about how these were built. Just like we don't have information about how the pyramid was actually built. We have some blueprints that people have drawn out, like maps, and that's about it. And yes, there are art. You can see that every detail of this has the biblical stories in it, right? Okay, so let's move on from this. So these are the figures, and that's the labyrinth. So any thoughts on that? What do you guys think about the correlation between this and the computer chips, which there are many of? It's not just one, okay? It's the way that they're designed. What do you think of that? Do you think that's coincidence, or what do you think? Any thoughts? Yeah. It's weird. Do you think they might have known something that we don't really understand what they did with it? Or like we're like tapping into the same thing with making our computer chips, but we don't know what we're tapping into. It's like the same thing, but in a different way. That's okay. Let's go back to our slideshow here. Here's another cathedral I want to talk about. This kind of a crazy cathedral. Canterbury Cathedral. And let's go to this page. So you can see the way it's built is similar. Okay, so we know it's all of the same time period because of the way it's built upon itself. To show you some photos of this place. glass windows, flying buttresses. You see this lacy kind of architecture. This is very reminiscent of Gothic art. Anything that has these points on the sides. And these ribbed vault ceilings. So ribbed vault ceilings. So that's how they were able to get them to go so high. Now there is a story about this one architect who lived in Turkey, and he lived in these caves. I'm going to talk about them. And inside of these caves were some of these ribbed ceilings already there. So they were done way before Gothic art time. And then he was inspired and created a lot. Became an architect. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these inventions are done even before the Gothic time period, and found in Turkey underground. And I'm going to show you it. Okay, so you guys know I'm serious about. I know what I'm talking about, something real. Okay, and then let's go back to quick and on Wikipedia. Okay, so this was founded in 597. Okay, so founded. That doesn't mean it was created. Okay, so that's a long time ago, right? We're talking so long ago. So all of these historians and architect historians, they, they'll claim their life on this stuff. Yet we are talking about such a long time ago, and finding something is founded. It's part of the early Christian time period. Okay. A lot of these things should blow your mind a little bit. Because there are some theories that we actually were way more advanced in this before and kind of fell. And we have remnants of that. So these are some of this is the Russian versions I was talking about. And I just wanted to show you some of these intricate details. Okay, we're not going to go to Proto-Renaissance yet because unless my slideshow's a little out of reach. There it is. So we have these in America. This one is in Washington and New York. Yes. So, do they ever make these anymore, these cathedrals? No. Well, it's kind of like the stadium, right? Here's one in Milan. Just kind of like, I can just like overwhelm you with cathedrals. There's so many of them all over the place, but they're massive. You see these massive structures? They're absolutely massive and breathtaking. Okay, we already went to Christchurch Cathedral. Actually, I'm gonna go back for a second. I want to show you some pictures of this cathedral. Okay, so these sharp points at the very top of these cathedrals are interesting, and you have that elongated look as well. This is the Piazza Duomo, Milan. And oftentimes you'll have this cross inside of the churches on the floor. There's a drawing of it. And this is the roof that you can walk on. And it's also the same. It's all about acoustics. You see how it's all about acoustics. And different people have come along and put new things on it. I don't know, like you can almost tell the different layers when you start looking at these of artwork. inside of them, just by the way they look. So let's take a look here at some of the cathedrals all over the world, actually. So it says hundreds of years. Some of these cathedrals have been around for thousands of years, okay? Because that's 2,000 years ago that we were talking about, just to get an idea. All right. So this is in New York, this cathedral. Milan. Okay, so like that thing said it took 6 centuries to complete. That's an interesting idea. 6 centuries to complete. So that means like all of these centuries, that's 100 years. We're talking, 600 years of building something, and who knows what was there at the beginning, right? So that's why it has so many different layers. But when you talk about this part of it, the cathedral, we're talking about something very, very ancient. And then there's layers of different versions of Christianity into the cathedral. So you'll, maybe 600 years ago, it had different iconic images, and then they slowly changed depending on which versions or what the art style was of the time. But they're very old, ancient. Some of them are more ancient than others, and you can tell by looking at them, like this one, right? You can tell that this is extremely ancient and is built with some sort of idea, technology, concepts that the Dark Ages, a time of ignorance, okay, let's get a perspective. This is the Dark Ages, so that means there's no technological advances, and anything that's scientific is burnt and basically destroyed. So all of this stuff that, we're gonna learn about this a little bit more because we're gonna go into this on Thursday. But all of this stuff that was revolutionized in Greece, okay, as far as like looking at the stars and telescopes and maps and all this stuff, okay, that all became heretic and people were killed for it. If you were a scientist, a doctor, anything, okay, because that would be against the religion. So this is a time that is contradictory. It's contradictory because it has some of the most interesting buildings and technology and advancements in what we consider semantics as far as like stained glass windows and artistic style, and yet humanity is in a place of ignorance. People can't read, people can't write. When you look at the illuminated manuscripts, you can see what mentality they're at. It's a very low mentality. They're just laughing at like animals and creatures and stuff. So it's very low mentality. So how is this happening? I'm just asking. This is where people have a question, right? Okay. And we talked about gargoyles a little bit, right? Okay, so we're gonna talk about I just want to show you more things. And yeah, these cathedrals, look at the top of them, they have all these spikes, and they're also have some sort of, there's a reason why they built them this way. This is a style, yes, and there's a frequency to it. Also, if you look at some of these like star things and metal at the top, it's not just for design. They don't do anything at this time just for design, okay? Everything is built for a purpose. We just don't know what those purposes are. Within the cathedral, we can tell the purpose is for sound and acoustics and light, right? There's nothing done just because. It's either telling a story or it has some sort of function. Okay. And there's a ton of them all over the place. I'm going to talk more about them. I want to just talk about something really quick. We're going to get into everything. Okay, there's so much to get into here. So who's heard of the Templars? A little bit? Guys? It's like fascinating stuff. The Templars and King Arthur and all these things. Legendary stuff. You don't have it in like... Anyway, there's a lot of interesting things about this time period because the Templars were originally a group of men who were monastic, but also they fought, right? So they took away, they wouldn't have a wife and kids, but they were just fighters and they fought for the people. It started off with the Jewish people to let them pass through without being killed because the Jews are always being killed. And during this time, they couldn't like travel, right, from one place to another without being slaughtered. And so not just the Jewish people, but it was other people too. Anybody, because hereticism, right? Do you guys understand what the word heretic means? Heretical is anything against the church would be killed. So that would be witches. You guys are familiar with witch burning? Yes, okay. So this comes from this time period because anybody who was not part of what was the Roman Catholic Church at the time would be killed. Eventually, the Knights Templars worked for the church at a certain point because they became extremely wealthy because they stole a lot of money. But this is something that I'm going to get into more. So this is the symbol of the Knights Templars cross. This is the cross, and it is also a light particle. And we can see it here. Right? Okay, I'm going to stop here and we're going to spend some time in the journal because I know I have like journal assignments, so that way you can spend a couple minutes in class right now. I want you to think about this time period. You don't have all the information yet, but you do have the information that we have the early Christians, right? Islamic art, Byzantine art. Byzantine art basically is early Christian art with a Romanesque flair. That's pretty much it, okay? So it's just that it's the older versions. And then as we get into this more, we get into these cathedrals. They start as churches, whatever, and they move into these vast cathedrals. Okay. And there's a lot of information in this time. This is the cross. The relics. This is, I want you to read this book, this chapter. I might even read a little bit in the class, but it's very important that this is read too, to understand everything. There's a quiz on it. So this is the one. I have it open. Okay, we're gonna close up here in a minute. So this is called Systematic Erasure of an Advanced Culture of Art and Beauty. We're going to get into this a lot because there's a lot here during this time. All right, so we're going to read this and we're going to take a quiz with it. That's the assignments. This has no pictures. This one has no pictures. The other ones did. It's written differently, okay? Because this is actually a published work, but this is just a chapter. So So it's cited and everything. The other ones were kind of just like sloppily put together. So, Christianity is the emperor's religion, and Christians can anticipate special favor from him. That was Emperor Constantine. So he created the Christian religion as a religion that spread, right? So he played a pivotal role in the Christian Roman Empire and legalized Christianity. So, okay, I'm gonna stop here. So you guys can continue to write a little bit, or you can leave, and we'll come back and pick up where we left off. Okay? But you will have to submit some journal writing, so if you want to stay and write a little bit about this time period. And I would like you to write a little bit about semantics too, because I talk a lot about semantics.